Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We've got a great show lined up for you today. We've got Mark Schaffline talking economics, Bitcoin, gold, and beyond. Then we got Dr. Mark Sherwood talking sugary, icy drinks, ADHD drugs, and more. And then we're going to wrap it up with Mike Dillon, who actually went to high school with some of the Epstein victims. You're not going to want to miss it. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. We are now joined by Mark Schaffline of the Schaffline Report right here on Patriot TV. We're going to be talking economy, and let's talk the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, Wall Street in general. Some pretty big movements, maybe in the negative direction. Now, I've heard a lot of the pundits out there that are saying they're trying to sabotage the Trump economy. I can't say that I necessarily disagree with some of that sentiment, etc. At the same time, we were talking before the inauguration how hard it was going to be to get prices down realistically with the amount of liquid cash in the market where we have been for the past several years. And we're really not seeing prices come down, right? I would assume if we are able to drill, maybe 12 months from now, my gas is going to go down. If we can get the Fed to cut interest rates, we'll see. Maybe prices lower, but those things aren't happening. So where do you see the economy, the stock market, and what movements can we expect in the coming days and weeks, Mark?
Well, Jason, thanks for having me back on your show. And I see a few issues out there, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Look, you've had what we've seen so far as a garden variety correction, roughly 9% on the S&P 500. Now, some of the high-flying tech stocks, the old, as they used to call them, the Magnificent Seven, those have been an absolute disaster this year. You know, names like Tesla, NVIDIA. Now, Tesla's had a rebound the last couple of days. But, you know, Amazon, Microsoft, all the glory names. And what had happened, Jason, a lot of the hedge funds had used leverage, meaning they borrowed money to juice the returns by buying into those high-flying technology stocks. I could name some others, Palantir, companies like that. Now, we've traded some of those ourselves, but, you know, we're not actively involved with them right now. But you've got a couple things happening at this point. Besides the correction, you've got some concerns about the tariffs. I get that. People like to always figure out a blame when stocks come down. And what did I tell you about 2 weeks ago? They take the escalator up and the elevator down. And that's what we've seen really over the past, 5-6 trading sessions. A couple other issues out there, and legendary investor Ray Dalio was talking about this. We have uncertainty on tax policy right now. Excuse me. You've got a budget bill the House passed. It looks like the Democrats are going to swallow it and pass it in the Senate, because Democrats are coming to the conclusion they do not want to be blamed for a government shutdown, because in their mind it hurts their constituencies more than it hurts Trump's. May or may not be true, but add in the uncertainty over the tax policy. Then you've got $1 trillion a year in interest expense. That's not going down. Now, if interest rates can come down as a result of a reduction in government spending, which Elon Musk and Trump are catching a lot of heat over, but a lot of this stuff has to get done. Now, are they taking the right approach to it? I'll let other people be the judge of that. But you have to make adjustments, and that's what's being made here. We cannot continue running multi-trillion-dollar deficits. The market will not absorb it. Interest rates could end up going up. You would have worse than stagflation. The other thing is the revenue piece to the model. Now, people talk about tax rates that the government has, but really what you want to look at and see, what is the revenue projection of the federal government? Because if you reduce spending and your revenue can go up, you can dramatically shift that budget deficit, which would have a very positive effect on interest rates. So a lot of things in flux right now. Bear in mind, you talked about the inflation numbers, Jason, and here's a big thing I want all of your viewers and listeners to understand. The inflation numbers came out. They said, okay, on a monthly basis, it was 0.2% instead of 0.3. Okay, that's great news. On an annual basis, Jason, inflation is still running 2.8%. And in the more important things that affect all of us, when you quote, what's the core inflation rate? That's where they exclude, important items like food and energy, 3.1%. So any way you cut it, inflation's not at 2, it's at 3. And until inflation starts ticking down a little further, you're not going to see a cut in those interest rates.
Hey, I'm still paying $1.37 for a gallon of water at the grocery store, And again, it wasn't that long ago I was paying 88 cents. That's water, folks. Water. Okay? You look at that, that's about I just look at my bills on things like ground beef or a steak. Long gone are the days of even $5.99 a pound for something like chuck. You're talking double that. And again, these are the everyday things, quite frankly, I cannot live without. I need my beef. I need my water. Now, a lot of people out there, they needs their gold. And, people are still speculating that gold could pass that $3,000 marker. Obviously, we've had the rhetoric from Trump and Musk that they're going to Fort Knox and they're going to stream it live and they're going to let us know about that gold supply. Now, number one, I think that's kind of long overdue. We'll see what we find there. For those that are not in the know, the last time that the Fed was quote unquote audited in any manner, and really it was a PR stunt, was all the way back in the 70s, where yes, there were cameras there, but it was not like they followed the people around, and the report they got was not so promising. That was before I was born, Mark. And here we are today, still waiting on what the next move is going to be. We'll see if that comes to pass, especially with the news directed at USAID that they're going to be shredding and burning all the documentation that has not already gone to be audited. Nothing says transparency and being on the level like shredding and burning your documentation. So when we are talking about gold, when we are talking about the public perception, streaming, etc., value, what's the reality surrounding not only gold as an investment, but what our strategic stockpiles really are in this country?
Well, gold's up about 10% this year. It's up about 40%. Year to date, it's up about 40% last year and up like 75% over the past 5 years. Why is this happening? Central banks are the primary culprits. They have been accumulating gold at a fairly rapid pace. Now, why are they doing that? There's a move among some countries to de-dollarize, meaning they want to shift away from dollars. Some of the Brazil, Russia, India, China are the main culprits behind that. But central banks around the globe have been trying to accumulate gold because they're concerned about the inflation rate that could come back. It's down a little bit, but we just talked about it, 3%. But again, people are concerned about it. The U.S. policies in an area of uncertainty, gold traditionally has been a safe haven where countries and individuals have flocked to. And that's no different than what's happening right now. If the government can generate the revenues needed to keep operations going, reduce the expenses, that will take some pressure off of interest rates, maybe allow them to come down. And as interest rates come down, that is a very favorable situation related to gold. Why is that? Well, when interest rates are going up, people can say, hey, wait a second, why do I want to sit and own gold when it pays nothing? Because the value of gold is what people are willing to pay for because it doesn't throw off any dividends. But for thousands of years, it's been a historical store of value. Now, I know we're going to talk a little bit about crypto later on, but same principle applies, different methodology though. So governments are accumulating gold. Interest rates have come down. There's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace, and the de-dollarization policies, that's having an effect. Now, before you just take a look at this, gold has been hovering 2,900 to 3,000. What's it going to take to push through there? More of the same, and I think we're likely to get that.
What do you think this means for silver?
I think it's bullish for silver because silver is also used as an industrial metal. A lot of people, it's silver, they call it the poor man's gold. But let me tell you something. I'm dating way, 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 way back. But a group of investors called the Hunt family tried to corner the silver market decades ago, and they damn near succeeded. And prices shot up way more on a percentage basis than gold did. Right now, the gold silver ratio sort of favors gold, but that could shift at any moment.
So let's talk crypto. And we have been
Okay.
discussing it. When we had it at a high of over $103,000, we did warn people that it could go down to 70, maybe even less. Right now, as we record this interview, we're at about 82. Okay, so yeah, again, when we warn people of not just 10%, but 20%, maybe plus losses, maybe 40, 50%, which we actually saw more of in that last big price hike and dip when you hit that 70K marker. She dipped just below 20 at one point, folks.
Yeah.
Right now, where do you think the bottom actually is? I don't know that it's going to go below, say, 60. But once again, once you start having people sell off that can make a large profit on this, and really they're not only just looking at the profit, they're looking to tank it so that they can rebuy the same amount of crypto that they just sold off for that margin. It's how the game works, folks. What do you think about Bitcoin right now? Too volatile to invest in, and when would you suggest people what number should they start buying back in, and if they're pretty big on selling right now?
Well, I think you're going to see some significant selling. Pressure hasn't even really started yet. You haven't really had the panic selling that you've seen in some type of stocks. I mean, yeah, Bitcoin's down from what it hit a high of 108, something like that. So it's down a little more than 22%. That's a garden variety correction. I mean, it's in a long-term chart, it doesn't even barely budget. So I think the bottom could be significantly lower right now. When you look at things like gold, you say, well, could gold go down precipitously? It's done it before, but gold's got a 3,000-year track record where when prices dip, there's buyers that step in. Plus, gold's used for jewelry and some type of, it does have a limited industrial use, but a lot of people around the world, they buy it for jewelry purposes. And when you get central banks hoarding it and that, you got a basis. Crypto is still sort of the greater fool theory. What's it worth? Nobody really knows. I mean, there's 21 million Bitcoins outstanding. At one point, the U.S. government had some of them. And, the U.S. government's going to be collecting Bitcoin through currency transactions, for enforcement actions. Okay, I get that. The government can't buy Bitcoin because it increases, the deficit. They're not allowed to do that. So if people start to panic, think about this, Jason. The people that bought crypto north of 100, how much pain do you think they can take? They maybe wrote it down into the mid 80s, but guess what? What if it goes into the mid 70s? What if some people bought it on margin through their Robinhood accounts? They're not going to be able to put more capital in, and they're going to get margined out. And then what you really need to see on Bitcoin is just what I call the flush, a massive panic, huge volume. Get the weak hands out, if you will, and then where could it go? Oh, well, I said below 70 a couple of weeks ago. What, we got 78,000 the other day, and I think when you and I talked, it was hovering somewhere in the mid 90s. So it could go much lower than 70. People say, well, can it go to 50 or 60? It could go lower than that. Why? Because there's no foundation on the basis of value. Yeah, you have companies like MicroStrategy, who has become the de facto Bitcoin company. And there's a handful of others that trade that way, but you just don't know. I mean, because it is so decentralized, what's the basis for prices going up and down? It looks to me like it's a momentum play, and momentum on the upside is less than the downside. Remember the old saying, escalator up, elevator down. And that could happen on Bitcoin. It will create an opportunity because you'll know it when you feel that panic coming, Jason.
Let's move on to Tesla. You kind of mentioned them. Stock's not doing so great. Mainstream media obviously has turned on the Musker quite a bit. I'm not in love with Elon. I'm not in love with Tesla. I don't believe it to be a car company. But what does this mean for the greater economy? Because obviously it shows the hypocrisy of the quote unquote left and their value system that now all of a sudden Tesla's not the big shebango to save the environment. I got news for you, folks. Never was intended to be, wasn't the first EV company. It was the picked winner. And it wasn't picked by Donnie T. It was picked by other administrations. Big players had tried to get into it before. Companies like Ford, etc., GMC. Think about that. If they can't make a profit, how did Tesla ever make a profit? Well, government subsidies, work outside of the automotive industry, both in automation, robotics, but also in biomedicine. I mean, they are the ones that teamed up with CureVac to build the micro nano factories that printed up a massive amount of the shots. Again, a lot of the lefties on board at that point. Not so much anymore. Now, I don't necessarily think this means that Tesla is going away, but it's certainly going to hurt that company's public perception. And who knows? Maybe Musk eventually gets moved out of that business. I don't foresee that unless we get to mega extremes, but it's 2025. We're in Trump 2.0. Mega extremes seem to be the norm almost every single week. So what are your thoughts on this stock movement and where could it go?
Well, let me go back to a couple of things you said. As far as the stock, it really bottomed out Monday earlier this week. Tuesday and Wednesday, the stock has rebounded nicely as people have looked at this and said, hey, it looks like a little overdone. Bear in mind, it dropped 50%, Jason, in a relatively short period of time. So that's a fairly significant correction. Now, a couple things on it. China. People don't realize this, but China, Musk has a factory over there, employs tens of thousands of Chinese. The perception in China is completely different here in the US. They love Teslas over in China. So here, the radical leftists and the far left-wing kooks that used to praise Musk, now they're putting strange things on their cars, bumper stickers, trying to disguise it. I mean, it's insanity. And these, what do the left always do? We saw it before. Political violence, torching Teslas, going to dealerships, sit-ins. You can really tell a party that's near its bottom when you're seeing kooks like that do really stupid things. Now, is Musk doing some things to help himself out from a PR perspective? Probably holding that chainsaw didn't help him when he was at the CPAC conference. I mean,
let me just say this. I'm glad you brought that up. Because, my brother and I, we talk politics quite a lot. He's way more, quote unquote, black pilled than I ever was. And it used to be totally the reverse, right? But over the years, my brother has gotten much more salty, etc. And when he saw that, he's like, you got a friggin' autistic guy with a chainsaw. It felt like I was watching Idiocracy come to life. There's nothing more pro wrestling than some guy holding this thing that's not even doing anything as a symbol. And it was hard for me to argue with him. I kind of chuckled to myself and laughed. And I get it. It's afuera. It's the new Argentinian Malay way. But what is it actually doing other than giving kind of this PR projection of what's supposed to be happening? Go ahead.
Well, look, on the surface, a lot of things are happening. Everything Trump campaigned on, he's doing. He campaigned on shutting down the Department of Education, and he's doing it. They're going to cut probably 50% of the staff from Department of Education, try to return a lot of that to the state. Department by department, they've gone through, and look, some of the numbers may not be as big as they anticipated, but at the end of the day, they are exposing significant, what I call grift. Why are the Democrats so absolutely going ballistic about this? Because they're the ones being identified. And this whole scam that the Democrats have been doing for decades about slush money for environmental causes, it's all BS. It ended up lining these nonprofits, these non-government organizations, and then the money ended up being shifted back to Democratic donors. So it was all a scam. Musk has exposed it. And guess what? When people get exposed as a scammer, they fight back. And that's what's going on. And all these radical left-wing lunatics out there doing this stupid stuff, I mean, they are just lashing out because they have no plan, Jason. And when you see this kind of stuff, it reinforces the idea that, hey, we knew we had a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. It's being exposed. Now, you can question the methodology, and believe me, a lot of people are. But at the end of the day, this government has to shrink because it had ballooned so big. Then the government, as a percentage of the gross domestic product, it greatly expanded. Bear in mind, we have a $7 trillion federal expenditures right now. 5 years ago, it was $4 trillion. That is insane growth in government. And the private sector hasn't grown to keep up with that. So we have to increase the revenues, and we can do that by growth. Now, you asked me earlier in the show about the growth rates. Yeah, I think the United States, instead of being in that 2 to 3% growth range, we're in the 1 to 2 range, and that's not a great formula. But they've got to cut these expenditures out. And it's never pretty. I know a lot of people get affected by it, but at the end of the day, the government cannot continue to run $2 trillion deficits.
Mark, what would you like to leave the audience with, and when can they check out the Shaftline Report right here on Patriot TV?
Well, we want to encourage everybody to continue MSOM, our flagship show. Shaftline Report every weekend, Saturday and Sundays, 3 o'clock. We'd love to have you stick with us.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. More Making Sense of the Madness after this. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that Making Sense of the Madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support. And we are back. We are now joined by Dr. Mark Sherwood. You can check out him and his wife over at sherwood.tv. Now, I sent you a couple stories, one in the realm of sugar, and the other in the realm of quote-unquote ADHD or maybe hyperactivity, pills and prescriptions. And, I come from that era where they would say, oh, you're bouncing off the walls from sugar. But then by the next generation, if you were bouncing off the walls from sugar and not paying attention, now it was okay to give you medications like Ritalin and others. All things that I completely opposed. As you could probably imagine, I was a pretty hyperactive kid. I can barely shut my mouth now. I was literally the kid that was told to shut up multiple times by my teacher in every damn class I had, all the way up through 12th grade. Now, I read this one earlier today, The Terrifying Dangers of Slushy Drinks, how just one cup could put a child into a coma. Now, I'll say this. I'm not necessarily worried about my niece dropping into a coma, but let me tell you what I am worried about. We do the volleyball thing every weekend. She's on the travel squad. It's an all-day thing. We get there at 7 a.m. Sometimes we're not done till 4 or 5. Sometimes there's an hour or two layover. So yeah, we pack the lunch. I try to make it as healthy as possible, although she's always putting chips in there. But we get the good lunch meat. We're a Boar's Head family. We try to make it pretty basic. I give her like $10 as I leave. Every damn time. It's the icy. It's the one with the bear. It's the one that I used to get when I was a kid at the movies. And it's the damn nacho chips with the fake cheese. And I'm just like, kid, this is what you get when I give you. This is why I don't want to give you money. Yeah. Please, it's not like I get it. Maybe you don't want the salad, but even the slice of pizza is going to carb you up better than the icy and the nacho chips. So again, how bad are these things? Because look, when you do get into the realm that you normalize this as just another bet, she's constantly begging me to stop it. Checkers to get a Sprite. I'm like, no, drink your
Right.
damn water. We're not doing Sprite every day. There's no soda bottles in my house. I don't even do juice.
Yep.
Like the best we do here is maybe some lemonade that I know is bad enough, but I mix it with my unsweetened iced tea, and it's usually like 75% that and 25% tea. But she loves that sugary lemonade. She loves the sugar. How bad are these icy drinks?
Well, I believe they're probably worse than the headline even portrayed, Jason, because in the headline we're talking about the rapid rise of blood sugar followed by the rapid depletion of blood sugar, creating hypoglycemia. That's what we're seeing that was sending people into this low blood sugar shock going to the hospital. But it's really a constant bombardment of this that really causing the problem, because we're seeing the blood sugar elevations, spikes, and decreases over the course of time, creating more insulin resistance as we go. And I'm seeing today more and more young people in their teens, yes, before adults, becoming type 2 diabetic. And 20 years ago, I used to never see that. Now it's becoming more common, sad to say.
So what are some of the symptoms that you are having a hypoglycemic episode and on the verge of becoming type 2 diabetic? And is there a way to reverse that?
Yeah, I'll start with the second question first. There's obviously a way to reverse it. There's an even better way to prevent it. Is don't do things that create this high glycemic load. But if you get low glycemic or hypoglycemic, you're going to get a little lightheaded, dizzy, weak. You may get blurred vision. You may feel a little bit out of it, so to speak, because we've seen this idea of diabetics, that are on insulin or something like that, needing some glucose to get going, right? But the bottom line is, when you start seeing those signs like that, it becomes a problem. And on the other side of things, high blood sugar can result in more frequent urination, more frequent bouts of mood. And remember that the sugar will drive dopamine. Speaking of brain chemistry, I know we're going to segue into that, but it will drive dopamine better than cocaine. So it is very addicting. That's why, your niece and every other kid today is going to be driven to those things almost like a drug.
Now, when we are talking about drugs, there is also this rise, if you will, of quote unquote SSRIs, ADHD drugs. I have been an adamant proponent of keeping these out of your children's life and adult lives as well, but they have absolutely exploded. And even last night, I was at my niece's chorus concert, and the kid in front of me is wearing the shirt that says, "It's okay to talk about your mental health." Okay, that's fine. But unfortunately, the direction they want to take you when you talk about your mental health is to med you up into zombie land. What do you think?
I am not a fan at all of all the disorders and syndromes. I think they've just become a patent handbook and playbook of excuses. You mentioned earlier in the intro, Jason, about bouncing off the walls of too much sugar. Let's face it, you're not born, and folks, hear me with this. No human being is born out here with the Ritalin deficiency. I don't believe personally in the concept of the ADHD concept at all, because we're talking about a neurotransmitter problem, and neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine are formed via the methylation cycle, which requires B vitamins and magnesium. So if you have these high calorie, non-nutrient dense foods, well, you're creating a society that doesn't have serotonin and dopamine. Therefore, you're creating a society that you can label them with a syndrome or disorder and then give them medication. I think it's a bad idea, and I think people need to take a fresh look at all this and get out of that system.
I also believe that as well. What are some of the steps we need to move in that direction? And then let everybody know how they can support you over at Sherwood.tv.
Well, if you're a parent out there and you started seeing these symptoms that you think in your brain are ADHD or ADD sort of concepts, go back and change the nutrition. get their nutrient density right. Make sure they're on proper supplementation with methylated B vitamins, vitamin D, omega-3s, magnesium, etc. Get their nutrition straightened out from the high glycemic, high sugar, high processed foods, and you will see behavior. And then turn the TV off and quit listening to those commercials of Big Pharma. And then if your doctor, your pediatrician is telling you to get on these drugs, you should find yourself a new pediatrician. Those are 3 key steps there. And don't let your kids own this, because I've seen it become like a brand or an ID card for excuses of misbehavior later in life, or excuses of non-optimization of your life functioning and behaviors later on. But that's the direction I would go with that. As far as people reaching us, we are found at Sherwood.tv. Right there, you see the website. We're all about optimization of health, performance, longevity, giving people hope, like I got my shirt on today, hope, and really giving them the information necessary and education to have a great life.
Dr. Mark Sherwood, a pleasure as always. We got to take a break, and we will be back right after this with more Making Sense of the Madness. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that Making Sense of the Madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support. And we are back. We are now joined by Mike Dillon of airwaterhealing.com, but that's not specifically what we're going to be talking about today. We've had Mike on the show before. You actually went to high school with some of the Epstein victims. So as far as that goes, number one, what was the time period that this happened? Number two, how many of the victims did you know? And at the time, what was your overall sense of what was happening?
So, like, let me ask you, when you were in school, right? You remember like when your friend would show up after school and he had like a $20 bill in his pocket, and you guys would be able to go to the convenience store? Or again, Jason, I don't know if you grew up, I don't know your background as far as, were you homeschooled? Did you go to public school? Did you go to private school? But I always remembered riding bikes home from as early as, middle school, even into high school before I'd got my learner's permit. I remember if one of the friends in our group had a dub, we all had a dub, right? That $20 bill, y'all kind of went to the grocery store. I wasn't a Boy Scout, so I remember going to the head shop, and, I casually partook in, some medicinal marijuana when I was growing up. And when somebody comes to school, especially in high school, and they've got $300 or $400 in their pocket, crisp $100 bills, the word spreads really fast. So the answer to your question, to give you guys a little bit of age, from the early 2000s to 2003, I was in high school. So I was in the thick of the Epstein movement. And my school was right on Okeechobee Boulevard, which is the main road that goes east and west leading into Palm Beach. So like when you go, you either take Southern or you take Okeechobee to get onto the island. And the bigger issue here was how many teachers and how many parents knew that something was going on, right? Because in school, we knew, like, I was never one, I would never slut shame someone, okay? And I hate to even say that, but I know that some of the girls were even teased because they were going over and, basically hanging out with this old dude, and they were making money, for giving out, massages. And it was a known fact that the girls would want to get in on it, right? They wanted to go hang out at this place where you could go and get treated to Worth Avenue, and we're going to buy you a shirt, get you a little bag, and you come home with some cash, right? Like it was no big deal. And that's what the worst part was, because Jason, if you know something in high school, everybody knows everything. The same way it is now, right? It's like telephone, right? It's you kiss one girl and next thing you know, the entire school is talking about it. So all of the students knew, which means the parents knew, which means that the teachers knew, the principals knew. And I think the bigger thing is, you can agree with me or disagree with me, but Jason, I think that there is so much stuff that has been compromised. Like, we're at a point now where we need to relaunch a new investigation, right? If we can figure out blood spatter patterns on a wall from a murder that happened 40 years ago, we have enough technology to ping cell phones. We have enough technology to redepose people and go in and get fresh new information that has been unadulterated and unredacted. And we don't stop in America. We need to go over to Europe, and we need to get to the countries in the Middle East that had their hands in this and implicating our politicians. And we need to really, really dig deep. You know, Maxwell, she's still alive.
And it's not just Ghislaine Maxwell. Again, especially when you talk about Palm Beach and Florida, several other women were in that quote unquote sweetheart deal that were protected from non-prosecution. Their names appear again and again and again and again in the documentation. Names like Sarah Kellen, names like Leslie Groff, Nadia Marcinkova, aka Nadia Marcinko, Haley Robinson, all names that we know. And those are kind of the lower level names that were in the recruitment business of these girls. But we have upper echelon names. Some of the people are no longer with us. You obviously have Les Wexner, but then you also have Jean-Luc Brunel, who allegedly committed suicide in a Paris prison. Now, you mentioned the fact that this is going on in the early 2000s. This initial case doesn't break till about 2005-06 when the investigation starts. Gets into the public arena 2007 and 8. What was the shift? Because you mentioned that there were a couple of girls in school that you knew were doing this, but because of the money, there were other girls that wanted to get into it. And for me, one of the things that I need people to understand from my research is that all of these girls initially go through Epstein. In other words, people are talking about a quote-unquote client list that doesn't exist. He wasn't procuring them to sell them off. He's procuring them because he was a massive pedophile, and then he could utilize them by pawning them off and either utilizing them via blackmail or business deals in many arenas, whether they be political, whether they be economic, whether they be technological. And that's what was really happening. But the main thing that was going on were these girls were being abused by Epstein initially for money at this estate, no?
100%. 100%. And not only that, but they were using the girls once they had them implicated. And I don't even want to say implicated because it's not like they were committing crimes themselves. But what happens is when you start soliciting other people for prostitution, that could be how they were keeping, trying to keep it on a down low, like any crime family, right? One of the things that they always do is they make sure they get the guys on the lower totem pole to commit a crime as well. So then that way they have them implicated. So they're not going to go snitch. They're not going to cooperate because, they have fear of retaliation. So, I would assume that a lot of these girls, once they were told to go recruit, it was then brought to their attention, hey, now you've recruited some people. God forbid, I don't want you to ever get tied up or in trouble in this. And, I'll protect you. And a lot of the girls were promised very big things, through his connections. If you want to get into modeling, or if you want to get into the movies, they were always like hanging the fruit. Right. But the big issue that we have now is information is not going to be as easy to come by if we were to reinvestigate and open this up again. Because now there's no transparency, right? These girls were told, hey, we're going to release these documents. It was a big part of the campaign was we're going to release this. Kash Patel said that he was going to go in there and he was going to make sure that it was released. Pam Bondi at CPAC was talking about wanting to be able to turn over the Epstein files. And here we are. You come out holding these books and they're smiling. Like, how could you smile about these girls who were raped and trafficked? There's nothing
And
to
how could
smile
you
about.
smile when on its face there was no way that those were not only the Epstein documents, but anything new? Just in the civil case alone involving Bradley Edwards and other lawyers before Epstein was picked up for criminal activity by the SDNY, people forget that it wasn't until they went to jury selection, and this was actually going to take place, that Epstein cut a deal with a lot of these women, and Bradley Edwards, with the other lawyers, held a press conference outside where they literally had box after box after box after box of documents right there. Now, that would actually precede. Now, it would be after some of the big dumps that I covered in 2017. But as you'll remember, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was, again, there was supposed to be a list. There's no list. And we were supposed to get the documents then. And I warned people that in large part, the documents you were going to get would be the same ones from 2017 with possibly some names and dates redacted. Exactly what everybody got. The documents publicly available on Court Listener alone, if you were to print them out, would take up probably the size of a 2-bedroom duplex, bottom to top.
Yeah.
So you got a binder. Oh, that's cute. What are your thoughts on the fact that if we are going to get these documents, in my opinion, they would have to be preceded by actual indictments and prosecutions of the criminals and then be released as this takes place, because anything else is going to be window dressing. How is it that you release documentation on criminals without charging them? And we're not just talking about pings from cell phone calls or text messages. You and I both know from the raid on New York, they have hard drives, they have burned disks, they have literal binders of those discs and pictures that are labeled that have never been made public. So when you're talking about document release, in your opinion, what does that really look like?
So I think the bigger thing, Jason, is when you go back and you look at, case files, right, from let's just say like a crime lab, right? When you've got somebody who analyzes the drugs. There was a very small case in upstate New York where they had found that one of the people that was in charge of like forensic evidence had a drug problem, and she was found with fentanyl and cocaine. It was in her drawer and also found in her car. So what happened was, you have to go back and you've got 20 years worth of prosecutions where anybody that was indicated in a drug crime, they now have to assume that it was tainted. The evidence was tainted because you can't test something. And if you have it on your hands, you've now tainted 20 years worth of evidence. So I think the bigger issue that we're going to have here, Jason, is if we have judges and prosecutors, police chiefs, if they were all indicated because of their cooperation and their illicit, pedophilia and drug trafficking and sex trafficking, and to what ends of the earth do we not know how much more information is going to come out? I think that there's not enough therapists in the world to help America realize that we have been sold out and controlled by another country. We have been, from the highest level, they've infiltrated not only the politicians, but the staff, police chiefs, CIA, everybody that was involved. You're going to have to go back and look at judges. Did they possibly give somebody a guilty because somebody else said, hey, I need this guy in jail? Or on the other hand, you're going to let this guy be off, or we're going to release you. So how far have they got their fingers into the very fabric of our society?
We got to take a break. The website is airwaterhealing.com. We're going to take that break. We're going to come back. Final segment of Making Sense of the Madness after this. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that making sense of the madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support. And we are back with Mike Dillon. Now, you're kind of alluding to the Israeli connection. And for me, I think one of the large aspects of why they don't want to delve into the quote-unquote truth of this is the international intelligence operations and plausible deniability circles that have been in place for decades now. And one of the major things about Epstein that is either never mentioned or totally and completely played down is that he is an arms dealer. And when you're talking arms dealing, you're talking about billions of dollars over decades. For instance, if you look at Iran-Contra, all of the weapons that went down to the Sandinistas in South America were bought by the Israelis. Mark Rich facilitated that out of Czechoslovakia and other Eastern European nations. It was then that the United States intelligence apparatus would fly up the drugs and other contraband from South America, sell it on the black market, and then repay the Israelis for that plausible deniability circle. You then have Epstein during this very time period. He has a passport where he has a Saudi Arabian address and a separate identity, and that comes out of Austria. Now, one of the things that people don't realize about Prince Andrew is, guess what? Prince Andrew is the UK's arms dealer. He's facilitated these arms trades for decades, hint, hint. And in case you missed it, because most people didn't pick up on it, the last time that the Epstein documents came out, comedian Louis Black talked about his one interaction with Jeffrey Epstein. And it goes a little something like this. He's at this party in New York. He believes Ghislaine to be there because there was an older woman that he thought was his girlfriend. Yes, there's pretty women. He's with his manager. He's with another comedian named David Brenner, who's since deceased. And David Blaine pops up as well. David Blaine just loves to hang out with well-known pedophiles, in case people didn't know. Not only is he in the Epstein Black Book, he's also good friends with the director there. I can't think of his name, but he's in the film An Open Secret. He directed big films like the Queen biopic, etc. Not a great guy, is what I'll say. Anyway, Louis Black gets taken into another room by Epstein. And Epstein points him to a whiteboard. He goes, "You know what this is?" Louis Black has no idea. He goes, "Those are weapons systems that I was discussing with the Israeli defense minister last night." So once again, you got a comedian that really doesn't know any background of Epstein whatsoever. His one interaction is talking to Epstein about weapons systems and Israeli defense ministers. That, along with the Les Wexner connection, who essentially gifted Epstein that New York home for the low price of $10. Folks, you can't buy a value meal at Wendy's right now for $10. He gets that. And Wexner is a guy that has foundation after foundation based in Israeli and neocon-like politics. Period. Full stop. He's also the veteran behind L Brands and Victoria's Secret. What I find time and time again when you get into these arenas, you find women, children, drugs, and arms. and it's integrated into the arenas of politics, entertainment, and technology. That's Epstein in a snowball, in my opinion, Mike. What are your thoughts?
Well, another thing that I always tie it back to, and again, this is the lack of love. This is the lack of religion. Like when you start digging into, Robert Maxwell and his connections, I mean, for crying out loud, his publishing house company was named after Pergamon, right? The place where Satan's throne is located in Revelations. And if you look at how hard, have you ever looked at the connection between his press company and our Scholastic book company here in the United States, like the McGraw-Hill, and like he tried to purchase the entire education system. Like I think he ended up, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or your listeners can go, but I believe I had read that he even acquired a certain percentage of McGraw-Hill publishing. So like now he wanted to make sure that we had a drastic control on our children's education. Right? The Prussian education system that's done our public schools so well. Our children are thriving as compared to the rest of the world. So I think at every turn we find out that there was a deeper connection, and again, I love that you brought up the arms dealing connection and tying that. And you look at how many people who were retired Mossad agents that were around Palm Beach and had leases in Palm Beach around the time that this was all happening. Is it just a big coincidence? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, let me also say this because you brought up Robert Maxwell. For those that don't know, Seymour Hersh actually was the first one to put into the public arena that Maxwell, who was a magnate for media in the day, was actually an Israeli spy. Now,
Yep.
Again, back in the Dizzy, he was demonized for that. It was fake news. That was a lie. But if you look it up, Hersh won an apology. But when the big papers reported on it, it was far from front page news. For instance, let's just go to this one right here in the New York Times from '94. These damn ads keep coming up because that's how everything works these days, folks. But let's see what we can delete with some internet magic. See, dicka-dicka-doo, no, there we go. We'll delete that, perfect, and we'll come to it. It's on the bottom of the page, on the side here, if you can see it, folks. Like, that's the apology. It's the middle of the newspaper. Let's see if we can't scroll down. It's the middle of the newspaper on the side. Oh, by the way, Hersh was right. Now, one of the other things that Maxwell was involved in was the type of espionage where he was selling promise software. And, this even takes us, and all these arenas intertwine, it takes us to the fact that we had mechanisms to spy on the American people pre 9/11, and we're utilizing them via Norris Insight systems, where you would have servers in all the telecommunication companies that would be bifurcated off the main line and go directly to the NSA. And then that information in real time would go through software like Carnivore and Promise, looking for keywords like bomb or explosion, etc. And guess what? Maxwell is the one that facilitated the sale of that to other governments and entities. We got about 2 minutes left in the broadcast, Mike. What would you like to leave the audience with, and how can they support your work, my friend?
So what I always recommend is, checking out our website. So if you go to airwaterhealing.com, we have the apparel line, which is Wits End, our Wits End apparel line. We, just go ahead right there on the website. If you scroll down, you'll see there's an actual apparel section. We're donating a percentage of all sales to rehabilitating children that were victims of child sex trafficking, and also those who struggle with addiction. So you can wear your faith and confidence right there, and all of our shirts are printed here in the United States. They're made here in America. We manufacture them in Fort Lauderdale, and it's the best quality shirt and fabric that you'll ever put on. Absolutely 100% incredible. And, I think everybody needs to trust but verify, but I think if enough people demand and dig, I don't think that we need to open up those boxes. I think we need to get new boxes. I think we need to completely reopen the investigation. We need to re-interview everybody, because you're not going to get to any type of transparency by releasing a bunch of redacted books, right? So Jason, you can have a book this big, but if you open it up and the only information that I give you is this line right here, I want the entirety of every single page. Everything needs to be released.
Couldn't agree more. He is the host of The Maha Show with Mike over at Lindell TV. Folks, you know the drill with this guy. It is not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and we will see you all on the flip side. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that making sense of the madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support.